Hello, everyone, and welcome to our last garden hour for 2024. Oh my gosh, that seems really weird to say. I hope you are all gearing up for the holiday season here. I know a lot of us are probably have a lot of travel plans and are still working on our Christmas lists and all of that kind of thing. So we really do appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and hopefully we can impart some good knowledge for you. Just want to remind you real quick that we do have horticulture specialists all around the state. And my name is Gwen Funk. And as you can see, I'm up here in the northwest region of the state. And we have a bright sunny day, although it's a little bit cool today. And hopefully you have a good day as well where you are located. We are all around the state, so that and we're here to help you. So if you have any questions, maybe kind of find the region where you're at and reach out to the person that you see in your region. However, if you know that you have a specific question, and perhaps like Katie Kamler is really good with fruits and pumpkins and gourds, you have a question about that, you might reach out to her specifically. We are really more than happy to answer any questions that we might have or that you might have about things. And we are being live streamed right now, so this is all recorded. You can view us live on youtube.com/MUIPM, or you can join the Zoom. Either one would be fine. But you can also go back and look at all of the archived recordings from the Garden Hour, plus focus snippets. So those are all available for you on that YouTube channel. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and we are going to hear from Zack about our weather. Zack, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Gwen. And with it being the last garden hour here of 2024, we can kind of put a bow and on things and look at how our weather's going to end up and how 2024 fared here. And so just to start, I'll kind of look at how November looked and compare it to the rest of the year here. This chart is showing Missouri's statewide temperature each month and the departure from average here. And so anywhere you see those red bars are months where we had warmer than average temperatures, and where those blue bars are, we had cooler than average temperatures for that month. And you can see we really had most of our months that were warmer than average, and November really continued that trend for the year. So our state temperature was about 5.5 degrees above the average, and good enough to rank as our 11th warmest November on record. And that goes all the way back to 1895. September, October, and November were all warmer months. And so if we put those together, it was our fourth warmest fall on record. And I think a lot of us saw that with really kind of extending the growing season into late October and in the first half of November with those warm temperatures. And really looking January through November, the first 11 months of the year were our second warmest year on record. We're not going to break that record that's the 2012, which was our warmest year, but definitely could have a top 5 warmest year on record, but we'll have to see how December wraps up here. On the precipitation side of things, quite a bit of variability throughout the year. So started out the year a little bit dry heading into spring, and then plenty of rainfall from April through July. And then we can see here our kind of late summer, fall drought from August to October, and November certainly brought then drought relief. And so we can see that November's precipitation was well above average. So the statewide rainfall average in November was 5.5 inches, about 2.5 inches greater than that November average, and was our 12th wettest November on record. So kind of a flip there after the drought. And really, even though we did have a few months of those drier conditions and drought, our year-to-date precipitation looks to finish above average. And so 2024 will be known as a warm and wet year, although we certainly had some variability in between. Some records that kind of also were broken or close to broken in November. Last garden hour, we mentioned some of that really heavy rainfall in south central Missouri up to St. Louis. So we did set those new 1 and 2 day rainfall records for November. but also 18 counties recorded at least a top 5 wettest November, and a lot of those were in South Central, again up to St. Louis. One of those counties was Ozark County on the Arkansas border, and it was the wettest November on record for Ozark County. And then finally, another kind of impressive record is the second wettest November for St. Louis. That one's impressive because St. Louis has weather data going back to 1874. So anytime we get into a top 5 for St. Louis, it's really impressive to get into that record book. And so with all the rain in November, we really were able to knock drought back quite a bit. And this is the most recent U.S. Drought Monitor map that came out last Thursday. And we still see a lot of this kind of yellow and tan showing abnormally dry or moderate drought conditions across the state. But just looking a month or two back, we're in much better shape and we don't have any of that severe or extreme drought. Still some areas that are a little bit behind on rainfall, especially in the western half of the state. But overall, we're moving in a better direction with terms of drought recovery here. And December so far, now that we're coming up on about 2/3 through the month, it's been pretty close to average here. And so on the right is our precipitation percent of normal so far for the month. See a lot of greens, slightly above average for a lot of the states, some blues that got heavier rainfall over the weekend, but not a lot of dryness. There's a few areas basically on the Kansas border, those tiers of county in Missouri that are still drier than average so far this month, but most of us are close to normal or wet so far. Temperatures have been pretty much right at average, maybe a degree below or above. And so pretty close to normal so far for December. And I think that's why we won't make a run at some of those warmest years on record, with December being closer to normal. And so looking ahead, what can we kind of expect to wrap up 2024? And I'll start here on the left. This is our surface map that's currently valid and kind of shows the weather going across the country. I'll draw your attention to the area of green showing showers and storms all the way from Texas up to the Great Lakes. This was kind of the band of rainfall that's been moving across Missouri Sunday, Monday, and even a little bit yesterday if you were in southeast Missouri. And that's now pushed off to our east. But if you look out west, outside of some mountain snowfall, not a lot of systems lining up to head our way. And so with some high pressure over the center of the U.S. and not much out west, I think we're actually in for a pretty quiet pattern leading up to the holiday next week. And so with that, we can see our forecast high temperatures for today. Pretty big gradient, so cooler to the north, but still hanging on to some 50s in southeast Missouri. As that cold front kind of continues pushing southeast, I think the rest of that cold air will start to work into the state. And if you're out and about today, you probably felt that cold air, even if temperatures haven't started to drop. We've had winds turn out of the north, and we're seeing some gusts up to 20, 25 miles per hour. So if you go outside today and walk around, that wind certainly has a little bit more bite in it with the wind chill and those northerly winds today. And so with that kind of calm pattern I mentioned, here is the precipitation forecast out for the next 5 days. So valid through Monday here. Not a lot of rainfall across the center of the U.S. and no rainfall in the forecast for the next 5 days for Missouri. So a pretty calm pattern. And those of us that still have some clouds around today, like Columbia, will also see some gradual clearing of skies over the next several days. So temperatures, as I mentioned, these northerly winds are going to eventually bring some colder air into the area. So kind of a mild day tomorrow with highs around the upper 40s or 50. But once we get into Friday and Saturday, these maps show those high forecast temperatures more into the 30s and 40s by Saturday. And so we will see that cool down, but again, it's not going to last very long by Sunday, especially in southwest Missouri. We're warming up, and I think that trend's going to continue through really the rest of the calendar year. And so here is our next rain chance. And so on the left is the forecast rain totals Monday through Wednesday of next week. And so this does include Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And you'll see here on top, I've got rain chances underlined. I'm sorry if you're a snow lover, but I do think we're just going to be too warm to get any snow out of this next system. So it does not look like a white Christmas for Missouri this year, but we will see some of that rainfall. And so on Tuesday, those highs again, too warm for snow in the upper 40s and 50s. And really, southern Missouri looks to get the most widespread rainfall. So the blues on that map are totals from a ½ inch to an inch. And so no flooding or anything expected, but could see some pretty organized rainfall activity on Christmas Eve and going into Christmas Day for the southern half of the state. And so what about snowfall? When will we see some snowfall? I wanted to show this map. This is our season to date snowfall so far for the United States. Some areas are doing quite well out to our west. Lots of early season snow into the mountains. If we look in the Northeast, lots of lake effect snow so far this year, but not a lot in Missouri or really the central United States so far this season. And in fact, this band of snow you see right along I-70 here, we got about 2 to 4 inches, was really just one event on November 30th. And otherwise, we've been pretty much snow-free for the state. So pretty unusual early in the season for places like Kansas City, Columbia, St. Louis to have more snow than, say, Maryville or Kirksville. But we'll see how long that lasts as we get farther into the winter. But again, warming up continues to be the trend that will continue throughout the end of the year. Here's our 8 to 14 day outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center, valid Christmas Day through New Year's Eve. And the temperatures especially really stand out. So where you see all this really dark red over the center of the country here, that is a 90 to 100% chance of warmer than average temperatures. And so we can absolutely guarantee some return of warmer temperatures getting into that last week of December. Not as much confidence on the precipitation forecast, a chance for wetter than normal conditions to end out the year, but lower probabilities than we see with those temperatures. And then moving on, this is the official winter forecast from the Climate Prediction Center. And even though this is valid or produced on November 21st, it still holds up for what we're expecting for the winter. And it is not a good forecast for Missouri. So here you see not a strong signal either way with temperatures or precipitation. Really what we're looking for in seasonal forecasting is if we'll see a La Nina arise this winter and the impacts we might see. But that La Nina is dragging its feet, and so a lot of uncertainty in the forecast for now, as you see. So we'll have to take another look once we get into the New Year's. So otherwise, that's all I've got for everyone, and hope everyone enjoys the holidays.
Thank you, Zach. Well, we might not get a white Christmas, but it will make traveling a little bit easier as we go through the holiday season. So appreciate that information. Okay, up next we have Dr. David Trinklein, and he is going to talk to us about holiday plants, and he always gives a really good and funny presentation, very informative. So Dr. Trinklein, if you are ready, you can take it away.
I'm trying. Let me see here.
I get it.
Can you come back to me? I'm not able to open this.
Yes, I can. I can
Okay, thank
certainly
you.
do
I'll
that.
see if I can figure this out.
Yes, certainly. Okay. I will go ahead. We'll just kind of skip ahead, and I'm going to talk about we have kind of a series of winter things that like what you can do to start seeds and things like that. So I'm going to talk to you about um, starting seeds inside. So let me share my screen and talk about the lights here. Okay, I'm getting there too. It's taking me a minute. All right, I think we're good. Everybody see? Oops, I think you're seeing my main screen, aren't you?
I'm still seeing where it's waiting to share. Oh, yeah, I see your homepage here, your
Okay,
desktop.
sorry about that. Let me try. We're all having issues. Okay, just a second. There we go. All right, now I think we're good. All right, so I started this learning journey when I started working with hydroponics and looking at lights and how they might affect plant growth. And I found that the lights that you buy or the lights that you need for starting seeds inside or growing plants inside in general, it's kind of complicated. So I'm hoping that the presentation today will give you some things to look for when you think about purchasing grow lights and what you might need for different species. So I'll get started here. So we all know that plants need light, right? And most notably photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is that wonderful chemical reaction that involves chemistry and physics and all of these things. And it basically converts light energy that we get from the sun into something that is usable by living organisms here on Earth. And, it's a very complex reaction that takes place over a series of steps, but it's just, probably what 90% of life on Earth depends on this one chemical reaction. So it's very, very important to us. Light is also important in when plants bloom. So you might think about short day plants and long day plants, day neutral plants. And so short day plants need lots of darkness and long day plants need not too much darkness. And we first thought it had to do with the amount of light, but it's really more about the absence of light. So things like chrysanthemums are going to bloom. They're a short day plant, so they need long nights. Tomatoes are like a day neutral plant, so it really doesn't matter. As long as they have the right conditions, they can go ahead and flower and fruit. And then you might have things like our prairie plants that are short night plants that bloom when the days are really long and the nights are really short. So the blooming time of plants depend on light, and then also seed production can be affected by the type of light. And then we have heard this phrase quite a bit, right plant in the right place. And we know that if we take a plant that requires low light and put it in a bright sunny location, it might get sun scorched. Or if we take a plant like this geranium that likes higher light, but we have it in a low light situation, it might become really leggy, where the internodes, the distance between the internodes where the leaves attach, becomes stretched. So light does affect plants in many ways. So when we think about growing plants with artificial lights, we kind of have to go back to our some of our physics, I guess, the classes that we may have had in school. And you look, it can be overwhelming. It's like every box has a different unit. You have different kinds of lights like incandescent, fluorescent, light emitting diodes or LED. They can be tubes, they can be bulbs. We have things that are in rings now. You have strings of light. There's just a lot out there. And when you look at the box, like I said, so the information, it's really hard to compare one light to another to try to figure out what it is that you're getting. So if we look at the ones that we mainly use for just indoor general gardening lights, we're usually looking at fluorescent or LED. I think most people don't really use incandescent anymore just because, well, I don't think they're producing them much, but they really didn't give the spectrum of light that we needed. So usually we're using fluorescent or LED lights. So if we look at fluorescent lights or LED lights and we kind of compare them to natural sunlight that we get, well, we know if we look at the cost, we know that sunlight is free. And as we go across that spectrum there, it can get pretty costly for some of those high efficiency, high technology LED lights. If we look at energy efficiency, well, sunlight's going to be sunlight, right? But if we compare specifically fluorescent lights to LED lights, you're going to have a little less cost associated with fluorescent lights as you would when you compare to an LED light. The level of control, well, with sunlight, we have like no control. It's just, it does its own thing with clouds and weather and all of that. With LED lights, we have quite a bit of control over the amount of light that it gets. Operating costs, fluorescence, moderate, but our LEDs are a little bit lower. So you can kind of, if you look at that installation cost and compare that to the operating costs, they might balance out a little bit. And then longevity, your LEDs lights are going to be a little bit more long lasting than the fluorescent lights. So those are some of the just general comparisons that you can make between the different kinds of lights that are out there. We also need to know a little bit about the electromagnetic spectrum. And this looks at, it's very complicated here, but this just kind of gives you the wavelength of light from very short waves, which we have down here on this end. These would be gamma rays. So this is what you would have with atomic bombs or nuclear energy. If astronauts, when they go out into space, they have to worry about the gamma rays that might be hitting them from the sun. X-rays, you know, probably from the medical field. UV radiation, this is, you know, we get that from sunburns. We know that it's out there. And then we have the visible spectrum. This is what we can see right here. It's just a small little sliver of this entire range of wavelengths that are out there and around us. So all of these other wavelengths are out there around us all the time, but we just acknowledge them, or we know that they're there. We pick them up in really different ways. So IR would be more like heat, microwaves for heating our food, and so on. So this is, when we're talking about plants, this is kind of what we need to worry about right here, is this visible light spectrum. And then if we zoom in even more on that, we have what is called the photosynthetically active radiation. PAR is the first one. So this tells you what plants are actually using. So if we look at this range, so this is our Roy G. Biv spectrum of light. Here are very short wavelengths, here are very long wavelengths, but you can see that plants will use all of this, but mostly they're in the blue purple range and the orange red range. This is what is most useful for plants. Now, this is important because when we start looking at the boxes and what they are showing, a lot of the boxes will say lumens. Well, that's fine, but lumens is really related to what our eyes can see, what humans can see. And you can see that that is a much narrower range of wavelength than what the photosynthetic range is. So that lumens may not really be useful to us. So you might want to avoid candela. That is just the amount of focus light that is like, say, a flashlight. It's like the forward focus light. And then there's the lumens. That's what the humans can acknowledge. We also have lux, which is kind of connected to lumens. It has to do with the amount of light per square area, whatever it might be. And then watts, you'll always see this, but it really doesn't talk about, watts does not give you the information that you need for what is useful for plants. The watts unit is really the amount of energy that's needed to run that bulb. So if you have a high wattage bulb, then that means it requires more energy than a low wattage bulb. One thing that you might see is foot candles. This is kind of an older unit that is used. It can be correlated directly back to the PAR. So it's a little bit more useful, but again, you don't see that very often on the boxes. So we want to avoid these kinds of units, but then what we want to look for are these units here. So, oh my gosh, look at these weird, really long words, right? And it's like, what is all of this? So I've already talked about the photosynthetically active radiation. These are the wavelengths that are needed for plants to photosynthesize. And it's going to be higher in the 400 part and near the 700. So that's what those are, the blues and the reds. That's kind of what you want to look for. Another thing that you might want to look for on the box is something that's called PPF. And you want to look for something that is between 10 and 50. This is micromoles per second. So that's a mistake right there. That should say MOL. So that moles refers, if you remember Avogadro's number back in chemistry, refers to the amount of something. And then photon, we're talking about the little packets of light. So that's kind of how that works, without getting into too much physics there. And then the most specific thing that we can look at is this photosynthetic photon flux density. So this is the micromole per meter squared per second. So if we look at this, here's lumens. Remember, this is what we can see. The ppf, or the photosynthetic photon flux, that is what the plants can use. Lux kind of goes with lumens. So it's the amount of lumens over a certain area. And then the ppf kind of goes with the ppfd. And again, that has to do with the area that you see, or the area that light covers. So those are the things that we really want to look for when we're trying to decide what lights we need to get for our plants. So what's on the box? If we take a look at this. So these are just some random, I just typed in grow lights and I'm Amazon, and I'm not endorsing Amazon in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not endorsing these lights either. I just wanted to give you some examples here of what you might see on the box. So if we look here, this is showing you the spectrum. And remember that plants need more of the blue and the red, so this will have it in there. It does not need too much of the greens and yellows, but if the lights have those wavelengths in it, it looks more pleasing to us. That's what gives it more of the light white color in that. So this tells us that, and so we have the wavelengths that are here, and it tells you specifically here for reds and blues. And then you may see another unit here, and this goes back to chemistry and physics. This K stands for Kelvin. Kelvin is a measure of heat, and it's based on absolute zero. And really what they've done is they've correlated the temperature that color is associated with. So your cooler temperatures are going to be like 5,000 K toward a higher number, and your warmer whites are going to be more toward the lower spectrum. So more of the reds and things, where the cool white are going to be your blues. And then, so this gives us a little bit of information, but I don't have anything there. It's all just about the spectrum of light and what light is available. The wavelengths, it doesn't give me anything about intensity. So if I go to the second one here and I look at this, well, here's lumens, but remember lumens has to do with what our eyes perceive. So and it gives us watts and voltage, but again, may not be necessarily useful. Here we see another graph here that shows us that it's the full spectrum again. But there's one thing over here. Here's that E. Or yeah, and you get them something that is between 10 and 50 for our plants. So this would be kind of a medium range. That's telling me that there's a decent amount of photosynthetic active radiation that will be useful for the plants. And then if I look over here, this gives me a little bit even more information. So it's telling me, and it didn't give me a graph, but it may be on another side of the box. But we have our ppf. So this is going to be that high end that's telling me that I'm getting what I need for the plants. And then also, oh, I'm sorry, here that's PAR. So we're getting kind of the 38 for that. And then the ppf is going to tell me that the intensity is good for that as well. So the bottom line is that different boxes are going to give us different information. So you need to look for those ppfs and the PARs on the box, as well as what the wavelengths are and the colors of light. So in summary, kind of research before you buy, look for the proper units. And I saw boxes that had micromoles and then some that just had moles. So your units are going to be a little bit different. That's like changing kilometers to meters. So you may have to convert the units. And then it is very confusing. So take your time, maybe write out the definitions when you go to the store so that you have that information. But eventually, I think you can get what you need, and hopefully that helped.
So Gwen, we have one question that came in. And I think it's one of those questions that we're still on the horizon of some of the research, but this person is asking, I've been playing around with the idea of bioluminescence as a light source for some of my low light plants, but I have not actually tried it yet. Do you have any experience or research on the luminol bioluminescence system?
No, I'll tell you that. Like I said, I'm just starting my research on this as well. I'm just trying to make some sense out of this. So that person may have a little bit more information about it than I do at this point. Sorry about that, but I can certainly look some things up and make a note and try to get back with you. And Donna,
Okay,
you may
thank
have some
you.
more information on that too.
I would have to look up that topic. And I know I've heard the terms used in several different gardening circles, but I have not technically done any research on it. So yes,
Can I just jump in?
Yes, great.
Bioluminescence is very, very weak in intensity. So it's a novelty, and you can purchase the likes of a petunia that is bioluminescent, but it only is obvious that it is luminescent in the dark. So you're not going to be able to essentially depend on bioluminescence from plants to grow other plants. It's a novelty.
Thank you. That clears it up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Trinklein. All right, are you ready, Dr. Trinklein? Were you able to get your...
I am. Do you see my...
I do.
Grand display of poinsettia? Why, you ask, am I talking about poinsettias when I should be talking about alternative plants to poinsettias? Well, poinsettia is still, and probably always going to be, the king of the hill when it comes to holiday plants. It's estimated that 35 million poinsettias having a dollar value of $250 million will be sold this year. And to me, what makes it so remarkable, this all happens between essentially November the 20th and probably about the 24th at 5 o'clock when stores close before Christmas, that little window of time. A poinsettia on the 26th of December is worth about as much as yesterday's newspaper. But nonetheless, it still is the king of the hill. There are others, though, that should get more respect than they do. Those of you who are fans of the late Rodney Dangerfield, you know that his coin phrase was, he gets no respect at all. Well, the plants that I'm going to talk with you about, and I've chosen only two for the sake of time, really deserve more usage and hence respect than they get. The first is amaryllis. Now, I put the scientific name here not to make this a exercise in plant taxonomy, but amaryllis as a common name is really a misnomer for the species. Hippeastum reginae is the plant that we all call amaryllis and probably always will. Incidentally, the hippeastum refers to a star-shaped weapon that was thrown by knights in the medieval times. And if you will, it mimics the outline or the shape of the petals and sepals, or collectively the tepals, of amaryllis. This time of the year, you can find kits available, and they do make nice presents for those gardeners on your list who might want to start an heirloom plant. You will find a nicely ordained box a very modestly sized amaryllis bulb, frankly, a very cheap plastic pot, and then a compressed disc of peat moss that you hydrate. I would use a different pot. We're gardeners, we should have some spare pots around because the one inside the box usually is very flimsy. The peat moss is fine, although it could be substituted with any peat-like mix. In comparison to what you might find at some yard and garden stores, and what you see here is how big amaryllis bulbs really can get. You will get more flowering stalks or scapes and hence more blooms if you buy a more expensive bulb from a yard and garden store. The old adage, you pay for what you get for what you pay, does hold here. But again, I say that for a start, the kits are fine, and we just want to keep them from year to year. When potting up amaryllis, we leave most of the bulb uncovered. We can see here a pot that's about an inch in all the way around the bulb, or 2 inches in diameter more than the bulb is. And we put the bulb, first of all, a bit of growing medium in the bulb, put the bulb in and then fill it up, but making sure that the top stays outside, and then we water it. We water it and we wait, and we enjoy an amaryllis for weeks, sometimes more than that, because we have the big bulbs and they're going to send up more than one, or in some cases, I've seen the kit bulbs send up 2 scapes, but nonetheless, first year they are somewhat limited. Feed and water regularly through the summer the amaryllis, likely in the pot that you had it in your house. And then the key to reblooming it is to force it into dormancy in late summer. We do this by withholding water. It will dry down, and that's fine. It's supposed to do that. We can remove the foliage once it's dried and then store in a cool, dark, and dry environment for, about 2 to 3 months. After that time of dormancy, we bring it out of dormancy by watering it. First year, you probably don't need to repot. Second year, you might need to, but nonetheless, we bring it out of dormancy. It'll be nice if this is a Christmas plant to do this, about the first part of November, and then we wait for blooms to appear in 4 to 6 weeks. And we can keep on doing that year after year. Amaryllis will produce bulblets that form along the bottom basal plate of the bulb. They can be removed. They can be increased in size by, you actually can grow the bulblets in your garden if you remember to dig them in the fall, because they're not winter hardy. But nonetheless, amaryllis can become an heirloom plant that will give us a lot of pleasure year after year after year. I want to throw in something that I saw this year that I'm going to, and I don't know who manufactures this, but this is not a good idea, I'm sorry. This is a wax-coated amaryllis, and their supposition is that all you do is set this out and let nature take its course. From the standpoint of the original bulb, there is enough nutrition in the bulb to cause the scape to form, the flowers to unfurl, and so forth. Not so from the standpoint of water. I imagine you would get a very small, weak, and short-lived blossom out of something this novel, but on the other hand, there goes your chance for an heirloom plant, because it's not going to be able to put out roots since it's been waxed. So novelty, worried me, I would pass it by in the favor of a for real amaryllis bulb. The second heirloom alternative plant would be holiday cactus. I use the term holiday because there are two very similar cacti from the standpoint of both physical appearance as well as bloom date that are used interchangeably. They both belong to the genus Schlumbergia, the Thanksgiving cactus, and it can be pointed out that it has the, if you will, tubes on the leaves, or these are phytoclad, leaf-like stems. And the other one is the Christmas cactus, Schlumbergia truncata versus Schlumbergia bridgeri. Most authorities now put holiday cactus in the Schlumbergia bridgeri. There is a lot of hybridization that has been performed on these plants, and the result being extremely beautiful flowers that for the sake of something colorful, exquisite, and fairly easy to care for that will serve you year after year, it's hard to beat a holiday cactus. Just very vivid colors, exquisite flowers, although they don't last more than a day or two. Excuse me. This can be an heirloom plant, and there are documented cases where this plant has outlived their caregiver, passed down from one generation to the next. They tend to get a bit pendulous, but nonetheless, that's all part of it, gaining age and so forth. Now, I want to point out that these plants are native to a very narrow region on the coast of Brazil. It doesn't get too hot. It does get somewhat cool, especially in our summer, their winter. And from the standpoint of them causing us to have the maximum bloom from our Christmas cactus, we would want to mimic those conditions to where it's native. And again, coastal region of a very small section of Brazil. Gwen mentioned day length, short days, long nights. Christmas cactus, holiday cactus, or short day, long night plants. They also would prefer cooler temperatures. Now, you will find that they probably will bloom in your home, even if you don't give them the required long night and cool temperatures, but they'll bloom much more profusely if you do that. And again, this is something that we start late in the summer, early in the fall, and induce these same conditions that the plant would have been subject to in nature. This is a cactus. It's an epiphytic cactus, but it's a cactus. Cacti don't like wet roots, so we water sparingly. But again, we say this is a plant that you can usually find fairly readily in full bloom, even in box stores, certainly in yard and garden centers this time of the year. Be careful if you take it out when it's below freezing. They will shed buds if they're subject to a shock like very cool temperatures all of a sudden. But it's a plant that will last generation after generation. Gwen, that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions if any have come in.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, you are quite welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I have an heirloom Christmas cactus that has been passed down from my great grandmother down to my sister and I. So yes, we are we guard that plant with our lives because we just think that's just really cool. So appreciate that. All right. So now another thing that we have, were there any questions, Donna, that we need to address?
No, I'm not at this time.
Okay, perfect. Okay, next up we have Debi Kelly, who's coming to us from Columbia, Missouri. And it's going to be time here to prune our trees. And she's going to be talking about pruning fruit trees. So, Debbie, it looks like you're ready. So, take her away.
All right, well, let me get it in presentation mode here. All righty, so we're going to be talking about pruning fruit trees, and this is a real hot topic for folks. They're really interested in this. And not everybody has fruit trees. I've never grown my own fruit trees, just so that you're aware, but I have done some trainings with how to take care of and to prune those fruit trees. So let's go ahead and get started. There are some key factors that we need to learn and to understand. So there are multiple reasons as to why we prune fruit trees. Some of them we think of as just common sense. Others of them, they really have a true purpose. So we want to maintain a balance between the shoots and the roots. If we have too much above ground growth for that particular tree and not enough roots, that tree is not going to produce as well as it would if there was a balance between that. We want to provide a basic form for that tree, and each of the different varieties, not varieties, different types, such as a stone fruit versus like an apple or a pear, they have their own form. And so we have to make sure that we follow the appropriate form of pruning for that particular type of a tree. When we actually do prune, we actually want to specifically look at where we want that tree to have its new growth. So when you prune something, new growth will actually appear near that cut. By pruning, we also can facilitate our harvesting of the actual fruit that we want off of that tree as well. Sometimes when it's so dense, we can't get to some of the fruit. We want to achieve uniformity amongst that tree so that the fruit is uniform around and through that tree, so it's not just on one side or another, for example. When we prune, we also increase control or management in some capacity of our insects and diseases. And remember, a lot of our diseases are going to be fungal, so if the more airflow through that tree, the better chances are we could have of not having as dense of a population of some of those diseases. We also like to make sure that we have an area where there's a lot of air going through so that when we do spray our trees, that spray can get inside the internal part of the tree as well as on the outside of that tree. We want to produce well-distributed fruiting wood. So we want to make sure that we take off wood that is not viable, not going to be producing any type of fruit. And that leaves us space for new branches to be produced so that they can actually have fruit on them. By pruning, we also allow light from the sun to come in and penetrate through that tree because we do want the light to get to it because it will help it to produce better. It will also have a nice flavor to it as well. We also like to prune because we don't want to have real sharp branches where the crotch of that angle of that branch coming off of the tree or off of another major branch. We want them to be pretty well open. The more they are narrow for those together, they actually have a tendency with bad weather or ice or a heavy load of fruit to actually crack and to potentially break. We want to remove weak, narrow crotches that are there with, as I just explained, as well as any diseased, any damaged, or any unproductive types of wood. So we want to make sure that we prune to remove those. By pruning, we also invigorate and we renew the tree, especially if it's an older tree, then we can invigorate that tree with new branches for new areas where that fruit can be produced. The best time to prune is going to be in late January, early February, but definitely before there's bud break on those trees. First, we need to understand about the graft. So the vast majority of our fruit trees that we will purchase will be grafted trees. So the bottom part is called the rootstock, and that's going to have the great root system that we want for a good productive tree. The scion is the beginning part of that, and that's going to be where we have the variety, the flavor, the appearance of the fruit is going to be on the top. Unfortunately, we may not get both of those wonderful characteristics with just one particular plant, so that's why we do a lot of grafting. So the rootstock also can help to control the maturity of that tree. It also can help to determine the age of when that tree might be able to produce its fruit. It also will help with the lifespan of that tree, how long that tree will actually live, because it can live but not be productive. But then, of course, as all things, it will have a lifespan. Cold hardiness can also be affected by the rootstock, and it also can help with the tolerance of diseases and some insect pests as well. So we need to remember that. We also need to know where on our fruit tree is that particular graft when we go to prune. That's very important for us to understand. Before we get into pruning, we need to look at what are some of the most common pruning tools that we have. And on the right side, we see 4 different types that are there. We have a hand shear, and the hand shear is used when the branches are 1 inch or less, and that is a specific tool. We have what is called a bypass or a scissor shear that will actually snip all the way through that entire branch. Another type of a shear is an anvil type of a shear, and that is not recommended because the sharp blade will land onto a flat section opposite of the other blade will have a flat section, and it will actually could cause the crushing of that particular branch or stem. And we don't want that because we want a clean cut. A clean cut will help us to prevent insects or diseases from coming in. Whereas if it's crushed, there's more openings for that potential of diseases or insects to occur. Then we have the loppers. Those are long handled. They will also be a bypass type of blades. We use that when we have branches that are up to about 2.5 inches. The long and the length of the arms of that lopping shear is good because it enables us to reach a little bit taller, but it also goes to a thickness of the branch, so that provides us with some physics, so to speak, for us to be able to use our arm strength in being able to cut that particular branch. And then we have what is the pruning saws. Those are going to be used for some of those larger limbs that we're going to remove from the tree. Usually, they're going to be some sort of a curve shape on that particular blade, and it's going to have about 7 to 8 teeth per inch on that blade itself. There is an effective motion that we use. So when we use a pruning saw, we actually think of going back and forth on that limb when we prune. And when we prune with the saw, the actual cut part is going to happen when we pull that saw towards us. Whereas a carpentry saw, that motion actually, the cutting of a carpentry saw is actually in that forward motion of when we saw. The folding one, which is my preference, I like that because I can take that handle, fold it over that saw, and not have to worry about cutting myself. And there's a little bit more safety with that type of a saw. There is a difference between the young and the mature trees and how we actually prune them. The top left, I'm sorry, that's a little bit blurry there, but that is going after looking how do we manage the pruning of young trees. And so there is about a 3-year process. We want to make sure that over that 3 years that we have a main area where we're going to have that. We'll remove some of those lateral branches. We can spread those branches out if they're really the nook of that angle is real tight, and there's a special method in which we can do that, and that's done during the summer when those branches are very young and are a little bit viable, and we won't hurt that. In year 2, we want to do more pruning. We want to make sure we have a very good central leader. We're looking at apples and pears in particular here. With peaches, we would do this differently. In year 3, we want to go ahead and prune off some of these lower branches because we don't want them to be that close to the ground. We want to be able to get under that tree, but we also don't want the fruit, once it does start producing, to lay on the ground itself. We want to limit the tree height, so we might want to go ahead and prune out around some of those tip edges. In the long run, starting in year 4, we're hoping that by pruning appropriately in those first 3 years, that we actually have a shape that's more in the shape of a cone, and that will be a great way to get our apples, our pear trees to start being pruned. So what happens if we have an overgrown or a neglected tree, fruit tree? And I've seen lots of those. I really like this particular picture. It has some great design. You can see the different sections with some of the different coloring here of what needs to be pruned off. When we look at these trees, we want to take an overall, assess the tree, the overall health. We want to look at that. We don't want to prune more than 1/3 of that overall of that particular tree. So an over neglected tree will take numerous years to get it into its appropriate shape. Excuse me. We want to remove any suckers, and those suckers are going to be the ones that are going to be down here at the bottom. Chances are those suckers are coming below the graft. So if you want this particular variety that's growing up here, you definitely don't want the fruit that's going to come from the rootstock. Definitely remove those suckers. You want to prune out any dead branches, any diseased or broken branches. You want to go ahead and lower the height a little bit with some of these that are going to be on the outside. You want to remove undesirable interiors. So here we can see this is growing upright, this grayer, darker gray one here. This one is growing closer to the ground. This one is going up into the middle, which could be seen as competition for that main one leader. So we want to remove that. But remember, we're only removing about 1/3 of that tree. Another branch I would remove in the next year would probably be this one here, simply because it's crossing through the middle of that tree. And that's where that undesirable interior branches would be. We want to also, like this one here, if it's low hanging to the ground, we want to remove that. We also want to remove weak and spindly growth if we have that at all. And again, we're looking at this branch here that has some of those branches that will be coming down and growing lower to the ground. So we want to get rid of that. Again, if you can remove less than 1/3, no more than 1/3 of the tree at any one time, that is what we're really looking for. And again, as a summary, and I really like this picture, so I used it again, there are multiple reasons for pruning. All of them are going to enhance the health of the tree as well as the fruit production of the tree. Make sure you use appropriate pruning tools for the very specific job of what you plan on doing when you're actually using those pruners, those loppers, and the saw. And remember that the young trees, the first 3 years, are pruned differently than the mature trees once they've actually been producing. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Debbie. That's a lot of good information right there. Well, we are about the end of our hour, and we have a poem Jennifer Schutter is going to share with us. So I want you to envision maybe a little stocking cap, a little bit of snow on the ground, maybe a cup of hot chocolate in your little hands, and just kind of listen and enjoy Jennifer's poem. Go ahead, Jen.
All right, so this is A Gardener's Night Before Christmas. It was written by Dr. Leonard Perry, and he retired from the University of Vermont in 2016. But it's so good we keep on using it. Twas the night before Christmas, and under the snow, perennials now dormant were waiting to grow. The roses were mulched, the soil piled high to protect the graft union so the plants wouldn't die. The strawberries were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of fertilizer danced in their heads. The orchard was clean, the fruit trees at rest, no diseases were living, much less any pest. The evergreen branches, all coated with ice, provided shelter for birds that they would entice. Shrubs were all sprayed with repellents this year to protect them from feeding by mice and by deer. Inside the house are poinsettias galore, while wreaths, boughs, and holly adorn the front door. While enjoying my garden this quiet, cold night, what my eyes then spied was a gardener's delight. A jolly old man in a suit red and white pulled up in a sleigh and began to alight. He laughed as he said, "I'm a gardener myself," and began to leave gifts packed by his elf. Practical gifts like tools and a mower, along with some labels, pots, and a sower. To protect her hands were hand cream and gloves. For my spouse, a sun hat in a color she loves. I'm sorry, there's a bar across the front screen of this. A hoe, useful for pulling up weeds, new flats and soil media for sowing spring seeds. Next came a trellis for the clematis vine, stakes for new trees, and to hold them some twine. For the patio, a planter and a large flower pot. Both were in colors, bold, bright, and red hot. To help our veggies grow sweet and grow strong, there were large bags of compost to help them along. Our cats will be happy with their new catnip mouse. Our birds will enjoy their heated bath and birdhouse. For fun was a rain gauge and a new book, a train for the garden, homemade jam for the cook. As jolly St. Nick finished, he winked and stood tall, and I heard him exclaim, "Merry Christmas and happy gardening to all."
Oh, wonderful. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Remember that our next garden hour will be, do I have the right screen up hopefully? Will be January 15th, noon to 1. Remember, you can register for the garden hour at the ipm.missouri.edu town halls. And you can always go back and look at the YouTube channel for the archived sessions. If you're wanting to save the chat with all of the nice links we have, you just go to the 3 little dots that are at the top. You'll get a drop-down menu and just click Save Chat, and it will save it to you, to your computer for you. And then remember, we have horticulturalist specialists that are all around the state. Reach out to us if you have any questions. And everyone, I hope you have a wonderful and safe holiday season. Thank you so much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your time. We hope to see you next week or next month.